So let's begin by praying that the schools of our learning should be to bring back the hostages, to protect our soldiers and Am Yisrael and all of the innocents, and to help bring a speedy end to this war,
Amen.
which is increasingly weighing on all of us.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go back into the Gemara, and I think we did this last time. Let's just do a very quick review. So what we learned at the beginning of this sugya, the Mishnah said that if somebody drinks melod ugnav, that they're chayav on Yom Kippurim. And so we have this statement from Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel that it doesn't really mean melod ugnav, it means kimmelod ugnav, which means not that it's the fill of your cheeks, it's the fill of one cheek where you push over the liquid to one side of your cheek, so it sort of pushes out. So then we asked a kasha on that from this brisa, and in the brisa we had this machokas between Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. According to Beis Shammai, how much do you drink on Yom Kippur to be chayav? Is a revis. Beis Hillel says melod ugnav. Rabbi Yehuda Omer mishum Rabbi Eliezer kim lo ugnav, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer kedei gmiyah. So the Gemara said. So what was the kasha from here? What was our kasha?
Well, Beit Hillel is stricter than Beit Shammai.
You're jumping a little bit.
Oh, okay.
What was the initial kasha? We had concluded before in the name of Shmuel that if you drink kimlolu d'mav, you'll be chayav.
Okay.
So what was the kasha from our brisa?
The brisa only there's four answers, only one of which is like the Kamalain Lugamav.
Kimlolu d'mav, and so why is that? What was the problem specifically? Oh, here's Paul. Let's wait a second. Let Paul connect.
Gives me more time to think.
Right. Okay. Okay, Paul, can you hear us?
I do hear you. Do you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay. So that's okay.
Okay, so
How
we're
are
doing Baruch Hashem. We just
I'm
started.
sorry for last week. We were at our children's house, and Miriam, she had this surgery. She still can't drive the car, and I had to be until we came back. It was already half the shira was already gone.
Okay. No, I understand. So as it happens, so we're just doing a quick review. So let's review our review. And this is from the beginning of the sugya. We quote the Mishnah that says, "Hashotesh melod ugnav." You drink your cheeks full, the fill of your cheeks. So then we had the statement from Rav Yehuda Shmuel says the Mishnah doesn't lo melod ugnav mamash. Mishnah doesn't mean really the fill of your cheeks. But rather it means that you push the liquid to one side so that it looks like the fill of your cheeks. In other words, from one side, it's going to look like your cheeks are full. Okay, so, but it's not both cheeks, it's just one cheek. So the Gemara asks, "V'ha'anan tanan melo lugmav," but the Mishnah says melo lugmav. So how can Shmuel, who's an Amora, come along and say, that the Mishnah means something that it doesn't say? Ema kim lo lugmav. So he says, nonetheless, I can read it as if to say it means like the fill of his cheeks. In other words, it looks like your cheeks are full. Basically, if you're looking from one side, it will look like your cheeks are full. So the Gemara asked a kasha on Shmuel. Meisive. We asked a kasha from this brisa. Kama yishtav yehe chayav. Brisa addresses the same question that's addressed in the Mishnah, and it says, how much does one drink on Yom Kippur in order to be chayav for drinking on Yom Kippur? Beis Shammai omrim revi'is. So Beis Shammai says you drink a revi'is, which is a fixed amount. Beis Hillel omrim lo lugmav. He says the fill of one of your cheeks. Rabbi Yehuda omer mishum Rabbi Eliezer kimel lo lugmav, like the fill of your cheeks. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira omer kedei gmiyah, enough that you would get in a swallow. So what's the kasha? Why is this a kasha on Shmuel? Why is this brisa a kasha on Shmuel? So Shmuel says, when the Mishnah said, Melo lugmav, it really means kimlo lugmav. And that means basically, like he says, to push all the liquid to one side. So what do we see in the brisa? Why is this a problem for him?
There's different answers.
There's different answers. Okay, but so what? So why is that a problem for him that there are different answers? There is, in fact, an answer that says just like him.
Yeah.
So why is that a problem? So I'll remind you, we said last week, Kama Yishta. So Rashi explains the problem right away. He says, Midaveit Hillel Kabari. The kasha that they're asking is from Beit Hillel. So what does Beit Hillel say? He says Melo Lugmav. So how is that a kasha on Shmuel? But Beit Hillel says Melo Lugmav.
Shmuel is saying it's not really the full of his cheeks, just the one cheek that's pushed to the side.
Okay. Okay. So why is that a problem from Beis Hillel? What does Beis Hillel say?
He says Malay lugmav, not pushing to one side, not kamalei lugmav.
Okay, so why?
And we have that answer later. The next Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Eliezer says that.
Okay, so Beis Hillel says Melo Lugmav. So Melo Lugmav is not like the way Shmuel says, right? Shmuel says Kimlo Lugmav, and Beis Hillel says Melo Lugmav. So why is that a problem for Shmuel that Beis Hillel says Melo Lugmav? So it's something we said last week that actually Michael Werner, who's not here tonight, pointed out that the assumption is going to always be that halacha is like Beis Hillel.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So if halacha is like Beis Hillel, then that's a kasha on Shmuel. Shmuel says Kim lo lugmav, but Beis Hillel says Melo lugmav. So that's the kasha The kasha is from Beis Hillel. So the Gemara says, Mi adifa mimas nisi. Is this any better than our Mishnah? Do kimna kedei shireh. Achanani kedei shireh. That we established when the Mishnah said, Melo lugmav. It doesn't mean really Melo lugmav. It means enough that you show, you make it look like Melo lugmav. So, what is the Gemara? So the Gemara is, this is the Gemara's response. How are they trying to answer the question? The question was, Shmuel says, when the Mishnah says, Melo lugmav, it really means Kim lo lugmav, or Kedei shireh. Beis Hillel says, Melo lugmav, which sounds like not Kim lo lugmav, it's a different term. So the Gemara answers, how is this better than our Mishnah? Or to put it in slightly different phrasing, it's no better than our Mishnah. It's no different than our Mishnah. That what did we say in our Mishnah? Kedei shireh. When the Mishnah said, Melo lugmav, so Shmuel said, that means Kedei shireh. Hachinami. So here also, meaning where, by what? In the Braita, according to
Rabbi Eliezer, the Rabbi
No.
Beit Hillel and Rabbi Eliezer are the same.
No, wait, that you're jumping to
Okay,
you're
sorry.
jumping. Just at this moment, the Gemara, what is the Gemara trying to say? At this moment, what is the Gemara trying to say? It's trying to say there's no kasha for Shmuel from Beit Hillel. The same way that Shmuel said our Mishnah means Gedei Shireh. So I'll say that's also what Beit Hillel means. He means Gedei Shireh. So he used the term Melo lugmav. It's the same term that was used in the Mishnah. So Shmuel can answer the same way. He means Kedei Shireh. So what's the problem with that answer? Now you can say, what's the problem with the answer?
The Baraita already brings down that same answer in the name of somebody else, Rabbi Eliezer. So there's no conflict between, there would be no conflict between, there's no machloket between Beit Hillel and Rabbi Eliezer.
So right, if we say right, Ihachi, Hainu Rabbi Eliezer. If what you're saying is true, to answer for Shmuel, that there's no difference between what the Mishnah said when it said Melo lugmav and what Beit Hillel said when he said Melo lugmav. So then, how do I understand it? I understand it, Beit Hillel, as if he said Kim lo lugmav, the same way I understood it in the Mishnah. So if that's true, then there's no difference between Beit Hillel and Rabbi Eliezer. So why is that a problem?
There's no machloket. We don't need both those opinions.
Right. In other words, then one of those two opinions is superfluous. Right. So in other words, now you want to read, just to hold on this kasha, right? So we have the kasha, Beit Hillel says Melo lugmav, and that's not like the way Shmuel said, where he said in the Mishnah, the shear that you need to drink is Kimelo lugmav. So Gemara wants to answer, okay, the same way that the Mishnah said Melo lugmav and Shmuel said it meant Kimelo lugmav, I can say the same thing here. But if I say that, then there's no difference between what Beit Hillel said and what Rabbi Eliezer said, because he said he actually said Mefurash Kimlo lugmav. Now you want to say Beit Hillel is saying the same thing as Rabbi Eliezer. So I can't have that. There's no reason for a Mishnah, for Braita, or a Mishnah for that matter, to bring down two concurring opinions. So how does the Gemara answer? The Gemara answers, Ika beinayu melo lugmav dachuk. The difference between them is a pressed fill of the cheek. It's dachuk. So what does that mean? Michael Schwartz, do you remember from last week?
I had trouble. I had trouble with this. I didn't understand completely what the chok meant. I didn't have a good picture. I didn't.
All right, I'll try to do the picture for you. But it's going, yeah, yes.
That's very strange. Would this mean that the Marit Ein is more important than the thing in itself?
Why do you say what does this have to do with Marit Ayin?
Because that it should look like.
No, but
This is what they write here.
What does Kedei Shira mean? Kedei Shira means it's just it's a kitsur of what we said earlier, that Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel lo melo lugmav mamash el kol she'ilu yisaken al tzad echad v'yireh kim lo lugmav. So the v'yireh, it's not about maritain. It's defining the shiur. The shiur, so it's defining the shiur, and it's explaining also this term melo lugmav. So let's just go through it step by step. The Mishnah says you have to drink malo lugmav to be chayav. So if I had no other information, then what would I think that means? That I would drink until my mouth is full, and I would have both cheeks filled with liquid. So,
if you are maximalist, yes.
Yeah, that would be right, but that would be what I think malo lugmav means.
Mm-hmm.
So Shmuel says
press as much as you can inside.
Yeah. Well, so Shmuel says no, but that's not what it means. What it means is that you take the liquid that you drank and you push. It's enough to push to one side, kedei sheyireh kim lo lugmav, that it looks like it's the fill of your cheeks, meaning really it's only the fill of one cheek, but but if you were looking at that cheek, it would look like your cheeks are full. So it's a definition of the shiur. It's however much you can get into one side of your mouth and have your cheek stick out with, full of liquid. So, and so that's what the Gemara means here. So then the Gemara asked the kasha from Beit Hillel. Beit Hillel says Melo lugmav. That's not like what Shmuel says. Shmuel says kim lo lugmav. Or to put it in other terms, it's not really Melo lugmav. It's yireh kim lo lugmav. It's enough that it would look like your cheeks are full, which means, but only really one of your cheeks is full. So the Gemara says, the Gemara first wants to answer, miyadifa mimatnitin. How is this any better than what we learned in the Mishnah already? The Mishnah said Melo lugmav, and we already established what it means is kedei shireh, enough that it will look like it's your cheeks that are filled, meaning it's only to one side. Hachinami, so here also when Beit Hillel says Melo lugmav, I'll say it means kedei shireh. It looks like your cheeks are full. But if you say that, Hainu Rebbe Eliezer. Now, if that's true, then I'm saying Melo lugmav means the same thing as Kimelo lugmav, like Shmuel said. But I already have that daya. Rebbe Eliezer says Kimelo lugmav, and then there's no machloket between Beit Hillel and Rebbe Eliezer. So there's something wrong with the Perush here. So at that moment, when I say that, it's this is the underlying challenge to Shmuel, because Shmuel said the Mishnah, when it said Melo lugmav, means Kim lo lugmav. And then I challenge him, look, halacha is like Beit Hillel, and Hillel says Bimfurash Melo lugmav. And the reply was, no, but I could say he means the same thing as in the Mishnah, Kim lo lugmav. I can't say that because Rabbi Yezer says that mefurash kim lo lugmav. So it must mean that Beit Hillel means something else. It can't. When Beit Hillel says melo lugmav, it can't mean Kimlo Lugmav. And if that's true, then Shmuel is out. In other words, it's a complete disproof of Shmuel. And I would go back to my original contention that Malo Lugmav is Kifshuto. It means that you fill up your cheeks. So Gemara says, no, that's not really what Beit Hillel means or what the Mishnah means. The Mishnah still means like the way Shmuel understood it, that it's Kemo Lugmav and Kedei Shir'eh, that it looks like your cheeks are full, but because when you put all of the liquid on one side. So what's the difference between Beit Hillel and Rabbi Eliezer? The difference between them will be the fill of a cheek that's pressed. So the difference is going to be like this. According to Beit Hillel / Shmuel, it'll mean that you put enough liquid so that one cheek is completely pushed out as much as possible. And according to Rabbi Eliezer, it'll be kamlo lugmav dachuk. It'll be enough to put the liquid in one side just to fill up the cheek, but it doesn't have to push out. So it'll be a smaller amount of liquid. So in the fuzzy image that you'll see here, wait, I have to turn my head. Like that is going to be like Beit Hillel / Shmuel. But if I just put some liquid in this side of my mouth and it doesn't stick out, that'll be like Rabbi Eliezer. It's a smaller shiur. And this is how Rashi says. Right? The difference between them is the fill of the cheek that is pressed. The Beit Hillel ba'in kadeshi salkenu l'tzad echad v'yireh kimlo mugmav bereva. It has to look like it's the fill of the cheeks to its fullness, right? With as much as it can. Rabbi Yezer kimlo lugmav dachu. Rabbi Yezer holds it's enough that it fills the cheek that's pressed in. The cheek is as it were pressed. So it's a smaller amount. So at this moment in the Gemara, so this is my conclusion. My conclusion is when the Mishnah says Hashotem elo lugmav, what it really means is like the way Shmuel explains it, that you take the liquid and you push it all to one side, enough that it makes your cheek push out as much as possible. Okay. So then we have this kasha from Rav Hoshia. Maskifla Rav Hoshia. Rav Hoshia asked this kasha, Im came, if that's so, Havale mikule Beit Shammai umechumrei Beit Hillel. Okay, so if that's so, if what is so?
If the shiurim are set so that Beit Shammai is a revi'it and Beit Hillel is kamo lugmav, the Beit Hillel then would be a smaller amount.
And therefore what?
And that's a problem because in general, Beit Hillel it would make Beit Shammai more machmir, and in general, no, I'm sorry, Beit Shammai less machmir, Beit Hillel more machmir, and in general, Beit Hillel is lekula less machmir.
Okay, so let's tighten that, but that's basically correct. Let's tighten that up. So im came, if it is true, if our conclusion is true, that Melo Lugmav, as it's expressed in the Mishnah and is expressed by Beit Hillel, means that it's enough that it's the amount that you put in your mouth to push the liquid to one side and make your cheek pop out, then in contrast to Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel will be machmir. So and that's a problem for reasons you alluded to. But first, let's just understand, in what way will Beit Hillel be machmir over Beit Shammai in this case?
Because it's a smaller amount than a revi'it, and therefore one would be chayav with a smaller amount.
Smaller, right. So it's going to be, according to Beit Hillel, you will already be chayav when you drink even less than a revi'it. As long as you drink malo lugmav or kimlo lugmav, you'll already be chayav. Whereas according to Beit Shammai, you would have to drink more to be chayav. And that's a problem because, why? Because of what we talked about last week, that generally speaking, Beit Shammai is machmir and Beit Hillel is mekil, but more than that, we have a list. There's a list in the Mishnah in Eduyot that tells us where Beit Hillel is machmir and Beit Shammai is mekil. I'll show you that in a second. And this isn't in the list. This machloket about the shiur to drink on Yom Kippurim, it's not in that list. So it means that the Mishnah doesn't hold like you. The Mishnah can't be that Beit Hillel in this case is going to be machmir over Beit Shammai. Rashi says, Im ken de Beit Hillel mechayiv b'chidei shisalkena b'chulei. If it's true that Beit Hillel says you're chayav when you drink enough to push it to one side, as we explained, Havale batzir mi revi'it, that's less than a revi'it. V'havila mikulei Beit Shammai, and then Beit Shammai is going to be the mekil in this machloket, as Michael explained. And then what's the problem with that? V'litnieh b'masechet eduyot gabe kulei Beit Shammai, shekulan shnuyot sham. Then it should have been learned in the Mishnah in Eduyot, where it lists the kulas of Beit Shammai, that all of them are learned there. So before we look at the Mishnah in Eduyot, let's just read a little bit more. So at this moment, I have a problem, right? I have a problem that if I continue to insist the way to learn the Mishnah the way Shmuel learned it, and to learn the way Beit Hillel the way Shmuel learned him, I end up with this problem that Beit Hillel will be machmir and Beit Shammai will be mekil. And I don't have evidence. I have evidence against that because it's not listed in the Mishnah elsewhere that this was a machloket where Beit Hillel is machmir and Beit Shammai is mekil. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, presumably this is either Rav Yehuda or Shmuel, says to Rav Oshia, Ki atshil be'og melech habashan atshil. When the question was asked, it was asked about Og melech habashan. The Havale Beit Shammai l'chumra. The Havale Beit Shammai l'chumra. That in that case, in the case of Og melech habashan, Beit Shammai is going to be the machmir. So I see Michael is smiling. So what does all this mean?
It's an extreme case. In this case, it means that the cheek of Og is much larger than a revi'it.
So it's much larger than a revi'it. So Ki Atshil, when they asked this question in the Beis Medrash about what Malolug Mav means, they were asking about Og Melech Habashan. Or to put it differently, it means even Og Melech Habashan. In other words, they weren't asking only specifically about Og Melech Habashan. But it means they want to know because it comes back, I think the point here is, comes back to something that we learned when we first learned the Mishnah, that it's very clear in the Mishnah that the shiur for drinking is distinct from the shiur for eating, because the shiur for drinking is relative to the person. It's relative to the size of the person. Whereas the shiur for eating is a fixed shiur. So when they ask this question about Malolu Gamav, they want to ask it in such a way that it includes all cases, even extreme cases, even people who are really big, like Og Melech HaBashan or Andre the Giant, if you remember him. Right? So there are such people who are really huge. Let's say I'm pretty average. My size is pretty average. I think all of us are within the average size, scale. But there are people who are much bigger. So I want to know. So what does it mean? It means that not in every case will Beit Hillel be machmir, because there will be cases when his shita is mekil, like in the case of a very large person. So that's why it's not listed in the Mishnah in Eduyot, because it's in a sense, it's not either a chumrah or a kula in reference to Beit Shammai. It's just, it is what it is. So sometimes it's a kula and sometimes it's a chumrah. So at that moment, so at this moment in the Gemara, we're still upholding our contention of Shmuel that Kamlo Lugmav means enough to push to one side of your mouth. Be that whatever it is for each person. Let's just see Rashi here. Ki Achil, right? When they asked Bibei Midrasha, when they asked this question about how much one has to drink, right? But in the Beis HaMedrash, when they're asking this question, Hafta La'el Kam Yishtab Yehei Chayav, right? Which is the lead-in to the Brisa, right? The Brisa started with those words. Kam Yishtab Yehei Chayav. So when they ask that question, the Beis HaMedrash, the Inyan Og Melech HaBashan, they're asking it regards to Og Melech HaBashan, Klomar, meaning Adam, Inyan Adam Ka'anakim Yichil. They're asking it in regards to people who are giant, people who are really big. V'havaluhu Beit Shammai l'chumra, which in that case, Beit Shammai will be l'chumra, because the Mechayve B'Revi'it, because then he always is Mechayve B'Revi'it, no matter how big or small the person is. So it could be that for a very big person, Beit Shammai is going to be the Machmir. At this moment, we'll take a little digression just to show you the Mishnah in Eduyot.
Can I ask a question?
You may ask.
Yes.
Absolutely.
On one side, it said Aselech Harav. So the person can choose the rabbi which the psak of the rabbi and his psakim, yes, according to which he will שלפיהם הוא ינהג, כן? There are different opinions. Why can't the people choose between those opinions? So anyway, you don't know where they come from. I don't understand why one says this way and the other one says another way. They have a discussion about it. But why can't the people choose the rabbi the way they want to do the minhag? This is what happens.
Okay, so let's break down for a minute. You're asking a good question. What makes me say I should ask this rabbi? Let's say if I choose to ask this rabbi. So first of all, let's establish something. A Selech Harav, let's say it means what you say it means, because it can understand that mission in different ways and different levels. But let's say a Selech Harav means that you have to establish for yourself who your Rav is for the purpose of Psak Din.
Yes.
Okay.
No, not for usually. I think you should choose one Rav and you go according to this Rav for everything. This is, I know people don't do that, but I think that's what is meant.
So it's
אני נוהג לפי הרב עובדיה, אני נוהג לפי הרב, לא יודע מה, הרב גורן, לא יודע מה.
okay, but to say it, but I'm saying, let's say minimally, it means that you choose a Rav, and then that's the person you ask for Piskei Dinim. Okay, let's say that's what it means. So what that means, what that tells me is, okay, you have one source that you can go to. And after that, you can't go and ask somebody else if you don't get the psak that you like. There's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah that actually talks about that explicitly. What does that have to do now with the machlokot we see, for example, in Mishnah or in Braitot, right? Machlokot Tanaim. So there, it's interesting that you asked this here when I'm just about to show you something in Eduyot. A lot of this comes back to the beginning of the Masechet. So since you asked, let's take a. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna try to answer everything about your question because it's a big question. But let's try to get a minimal answer. When we talk about psak halacha, so on the one hand we say, right, there's a Gemara in Eruvin that famously says that elu ve'elu divrei elokim chayim, that even the machlokot between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, they're both valid. So if they're both valid, so why can't I choose like one or choose like the other? So the Gemara there says there's a reason why we paskin like Beit Hillel, because they gave kavod to Beit Shammai. And so, but what does that indicate? It indicates that at some point in time, there was a general acceptance that that halacha is like Beit Hillel. So even if you went to a Rav afterwards and said, let's say a Rav who is a holdout, right? He's saying, no, I still hold like Beit Shammai, but already you're living in an era where halacha is no longer like that. How can that happen? Because then there are other klalim that kick in. So we have a klal that harei rabim lahatot. You have to go after the majority opinion. So at some point, it's no longer up to people to say, I think Beit Shammai is correct, because the Rov goes like Beit Hillel. As a sidebar, there was famous series of machlokot between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, mostly having to do with inyanim of Tumah v'Tahara, 18 things, where the Gemara tells us that that there was a time when there were more Talmidim of Beit Shammai than Beit Hillel, and so they legislated, right? They paskened these 18 things, not like Beit Hillel, and that became halacha. Even though it was like Beit Shammai, it became halacha. The ad hayom hazeh, some of those things are still pertinent to this day. Like, okay, so nonetheless, but in general, we're going to hold like Beit Hillel. So even if I go to a Rav after that time and I say, what's the psak? And he says it's like Beit Hillel. And you can't say, Well, but I like Beit Shammai because he'll tell you that Rav is going to tell you that according to Klalei Psak, we have to hold like Beit Hillel, even if we disagree with him. That's sort of the quick answer to your question. That there are other klalim that come into play. So, and I'll just you can examine these klalim on every level. So you might say, why should the majority rule? Why should that be a klal that's accepted? Why didn't I say I'm going to go after the person that I think is right? And then, if we remember, it was I think a couple of weeks ago that I showed you the story of the Tanur Achnai and the machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, where Bat Kol comes down and says halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer b'chol makom, and nonetheless the Rov goes against Rabbi Eliezer, and the Gemara there comments because of Harei Rabim Lahatot, which again that was a klal and a conclusion that Chachamim made themselves based on their understanding of the Torah. So the reason your question is a very good question. You're hitting at some of these very deep issues, and why should it be bichlal that I have to choose? Because this, I would say, on a philosophical level, that if you want to run a society, a cohesive society, you have to have some rules in place so that everybody abides by the same rules. Otherwise, you have a breakdown in society. You won't be able to have and haraya, because we see that actually ad hayom is that because machloket exists, and depending on the way machloket expresses itself, it can lead to genuine divisions between communities, between people. So the ideal is to try to have a single psak halacha that is going to be abided by everyone. Now that hasn't happened for at least a couple thousand years, but it did happen in the sense over these last couple thousand years. It happened, I would argue, at least up until the modern age, and maybe even up through the Holocaust, that in individual communities there was really just one psak. You went to the local rav, and he paskined, and that was halacha. What we have nowadays is a kind of a new reality, because here, where we have kibbutz galuyot here in Israel, not only in Israel, but I'm going to take Israel as an example, and maybe the best example. We have coming together many communities that originated from around the world that came with very different minhagim, and the minhagim were connected to psak. And now, let's say here in Yerushalayim, we all live together. And we're going to see an expression of this very soon on Purim. So most of the people who live in Yerushalayim are going to celebrate Purim on the 15th of Adar, and most of the people outside of Yerushalayim are going to celebrate it on the 14th of Adar. But here in Jerusalem, I can tell you, there's going to be some people who are, depending on exactly where they live in Yerushalayim, they're going to read the Megillah on the 14th. And there's some people who are going to read it on the 14th and the 15th.
Yeah, in Ramot, there are some such problems.
In Ramot,
where I lived previously, yes.
Yeah, and I actually have a nice little kuntras that a Rav wrote up about that. And I can tell you, before Ramot, there was a shaila that was asked to the Har Tzvi, to Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, who was the Rav Rashi of Yerushalayim at the time, from people who were living in Beit Vegan. And at that time, there was a stretch between the city of Jerusalem and Beit Vegan that was just open. It wasn't all built up. I think it went as far as like Beit HaKaren. And then there was a stretch for a long time before you get to Beit Vegan. And they had established their sort of their own minhag where what they would do is they would bring in a Baal Koreh from Tel Aviv to read to them on the 14th. And then they would bring in a Baal Koreh from like well, not Iratika, but from Yerushalayim proper to read to them on the 15th. And
Only Jews can do such things.
and Rav Frank actually chastised them somewhat. He said, "Look, if you do that, then you weren't Yotze this way or that way." Like he really pushes back on it. But why was it a shaila? Because this gets into Hilchot Megillah, that it's Yerushalayim is a kraf, right? It's a walled city, Yoshua bin Nun. And the Gemara says, Samuch v'nireh, that anything that is close and can be seen with that city, then that's where you read. But that's also qualified by how far away it is. So actually, the Rav Tuchinsky held that it only went based on what Gemara says, and it goes up to a meal, which would be up until, I think he gave the example of where the yeshiva Etzchaim is on Rehov Yafa. It's about one meal from the old city. So up till there is Samuch v'nireh. After that, it's no longer Samuch, even if it's Nireh. Anyway, I'm digressing. But the point is, I'm going to come back. Let me step back a couple of steps. One of the problems with having this machloket about which day you read the Megillah in Yerushalayim is then you bring in another consideration of lo titgodedu, and the way Chazal understood that is shelo tasu gedudim gedudim, like you're not supposed to take one community and split it up with different anagot, right? Different ways of practicing. So it gets into a very complex situation. What do we do practically now? So practically now, you still, what I see obtains, I see what people do, and what is still recommended to do is, it comes back to your original point, which is a Seilach Harav. You should have somebody to whom you will go to rely on for psak. And that person presumably is going to be a person from your Eidah, from your Kihila. And he'll tell you, this is what we do. That's the best we can do. But it's still a good question. This is a long digression because it's a good question. It's just off the top of my head. But I'll just show you something here in Eduyot.
No, it's just maybe it's too much. There is also that's the way I understand it. Sometimes a rabbi can use a minority opinion, and then they say, "Yesh lecha al ma lismoch." They use that in difficult cases where they would like to. It would be too hard if they were choosing for that case the majority opinion. So,
okay. So this is exactly the point I want to show you. The basis for that idea and when it's invoked comes from here in the Mishnah. So here, Mishnah Eduyot. What is Eduyot? It's testimonies. So what is Eduyot? It was the testimonies of the Rabbanim and the Talmidei Chachamim that managed to survive the destruction of Yerushalayim, and they were allowed to go live in Yavne. Right, the story that's told in Masechet Gitin, how Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a deal with Vespasian that after they conquer Yerushalayim, he's going to allow his yeshiva to survive.
yeah.
Okay, so Eduyot, what they did So that was a it was a serious destruction. It wasn't just the physical destruction of the temple and the physical destruction of the city. It was the destruction of the Jewish people, of the community, which was centered in Jerusalem. So those who survived, those Chachamim who survived, when they came to Yavne, they stood up, people stood up and gave testimony to the learning that they remembered, right? Remember, it's still basically al Baal Peh. So they wanted to start to record the learning that was remembered. And so it is said that Eduyot was probably the beginning of Mishnah as we know it. Even though, so it's a Masechet that's unlike all other Masechtot, in the sense that it doesn't deal mainly with one single halachic issue. It deals with the multiplicity of halachic issues, but what binds it together is that these were the things that people wanted to record, so lest they be forgotten. So we're not going to go through all of them. Some, if you've learned Mishnah, so you'll know some of them. It starts off with a machloket between Shammai and Hillel, not Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, and this is the first Mishnah in Masechet Nidah, and it goes on, and we have another machloket between Shammai and Hillel, and then and so forth. So then we get down to Mishnah Dalet. And the Mishnah says, "V'lama mazkirin et divrei Shammai v'Hillel levatala." So why does it bring the words of both Shammai and Hillel for a void reason, right? For no good reason. Meaning what? Basically, if halacha is going to be like Hillel, why should I even bother bringing Shammai? So the first answer is this to teach future generations that people shouldn't stand on their words, because we see that the forefathers of the world didn't stand on their words. What does that mean? Rambam here says, you shouldn't be stubborn about your svara, about your reason, and then to rely on that, and then to act on that. It shouldn't be hard for you to do the opposite of what you think is right. Right? Because in the previous Mishnah, which I skipped, I should have done this Mishnah. It's a famous Mishnah for this reason. Hilomer Melohim Maim Shuvin Posima Mikvah. El Shadam Chayav Lomar Belashon Rabo. Shammai Omer Tisha Kabin. V'chachamim Omrim Lo Kedivrei Zeh, V'lo Kedivrei Zeh. Ela Ad Sheba'u Shnei Gardiyim Mishar HaAshpot Sheb'Yushalayim. Ve'idu Mishum Shmaya V'Avtayon. Shoshet Lugin Maim Shuvin Posim Et HaMikvah. V'kaimu Chachamim Et Divreihem. I'll explain this briefly, but the main point that the Mishnah, the Mishnah that we said, gets from here is that there was this machloket between Hillel and Shammai about how mikveh becomes pasul. I'll explain that in a second. So they have their machloket, but what happened? These two gardiim, these two tailors, which was considered to be a very lowly profession, they come and they're living at the Shar HaAshpot b'Yushalayim, living like one of the worst places in town. In other words, they come from a very low class of people. But they come and they testify that they had learned from, or they had as a Masorah from Shmaya v'Avtal Yom, who you know from the Mishnah and Avot, where one of the earlier Zugot, that they said a difference. They said not like Hillel and not like Shammai in this Shaila. The Kimu Chachamim et Ivrehem. The Chachamim established halacha according to what they said. In other words, these two people who are not great Talmidei Chachamim, they're not Gdolei Hador, but they came and they gave a legitimate testimony. Even Hillel v'Shammai, Avot ha'olam, back down. So the reason that we bring any, so that's how I understand. Lama maskim divrei Shammai v'Hillel v'Vatala. So not like I said a moment ago. Why in this previous mission do I bring both Shammai and Hillel? For no good reason, because I don't hold like them. I don't hold like either of them. So it's just to teach you, it's to teach future generations that nobody should stand on, be stubborn in their opinion. That even Hillel and Shammai backed down on their opinion when they were presented with this evidence. But now we come more to the question of what Paul asked. Why in general do I bring the opinion of the individual along with the majority? In other words, if halacha is going to be like the majority, I shouldn't have to bring the minority opinion. Because halacha is only going to be like the majority. And here the Mishnah says, She'im yireh beit din et divrei hayachid, v'yismoch alav, she'en beit din yachol levatel divrei beit din chaveiro, ad she'yeh gadol mimenu b'chachma v'minyan, היה גדול ממנו בחכמה, אבל לא במניין, אבל לא בחכמה, אינו יכול לבטל דבריו, עד שיהיה גדול ממנו בחכמה ובמניין. So the idea is, a later Beit Din, she'im yireh Beit Din et divrei hayachid, yismoch alav. A later Beit Din could come along and rely on the minority opinion. But then it goes on to tell us more about how that works. The Rambam says, Kavanat halacha zu shim haya Beit Din shekvar asa kedat yachid lo yuchal Beit Din acher lachlok alav bekach. If one Beit Din already went according to a minority opinion, a later Beit Din can't come along and disagree with it. L'ifsokan hadin kedatam robim elim ken haya minyano yoter mi-Beit Din hakodem she'asa kedat oto yachid yoter chacham mimenu k'mar she'haya rosh yeshiva ze ha-Beit Din chacham yoter min hakodem. There are limits to how much a later Beit Din can come along to change a prior decision. But there's an idea that's built in that but in principle, later Beit Din could do that. But the way the Rambam understands it is that even if a particular Beit Din went according to a minority opinion and established it, so then the later Beit Din can't go against it without fulfilling these other Tana'im. But we could also say that it means Yismoch alav klomar she'asak divrei yachid v'iniach dat harabim. Bartanura says what we think is a little more straightforward, that a later Beit Din could rely on a minority opinion and leave aside the majority opinion. So when does that happen? So Paul, let's say in the kind of case that you're referring to, it's got, what it means is that sometimes there are other circumstances that come into play. When you paskin, I say this as a person who's not a posek. This is one of the reasons I'm not a posek. That the point is, a posek could be confronted with a particular shaila, and what he might say is the particular circumstances that are presented in this shaila are not as straightforward as they may seem, and there may be more than one question at hand. Like to bring an example from what I brought up a few minutes ago, this question of what day you read Megillah in Yerushalayim, maybe that depends on the way you understand the Gemara. Maybe it depends on the way you think later poskim understood it. But maybe it also that maybe there's another relevant factor, and that's this factor of lotit godedu, which is also a mitzvah. But it's not specifically linked to the question of how I understand the Mishnah and Megillah about where I read Megillah. It's a klal it's a halachic concept in a similar way to the way majority rule is a halachic concept. So sometimes, in order to make all the parts fit, in order to make a psak work, you have to draw on different areas of halacha. So in some of those cases, let's say to take a case of just thinking of a different one. I'll give you a different one that let's say this is a case that actually comes up in halacha l'maaseh. Let's say you have a woman, married couple, and the woman wants to get pregnant, and she can never get pregnant because of the way her cycle runs. That by the time she can go to the mikvah, she's past her ovulation. So a posek could say, look, there's a mitzvah of kriya riviyah. There's also a halachic, what's the word? Like a halachic imperative to respect, and to be sympathetic to the wishes of this woman who wants to get pregnant. There's various halachic issues here. So I could rely on Piskei Dinim that hold that she could go to the mikveh earlier. Right? And there's a long history about how halacha l'maaseh is now for when women go to the mikveh. So it's known that there are other opinions that would allow women to go earlier. So he'll say, given all of these circumstances, I'm going to rely on those opinions that say she could go earlier, even though if stam a woman asked me when she could go to the mikveh, I wouldn't say it's okay to go early. So it's a complicated subject. I think I'm going to skip explaining the. Wait a second. The Mishnah here goes on. There's one more sort of in this line. Amar Rabbi Yehuda imkang lama maskirin divrei hayachid bein hamerubin. Why do we bring the minority opinion along with the majority opinion? Levatala, if I don't basket like it. Shim yomar ha'adam kach ani mekubal. Yomar lo k'divrei ish poni shamata. So the simple understanding of Rabbi Yehuda is, why is it that we here in the Mishnah, in our learning, why do we preserve the minority opinion if we're going to hold by the majority? So he says, because somebody might come along and say, I heard halacha is different. So they could say, we know that opinion. It's a minority opinion. It was rejected. So there are different reasons why we preserve things. Just maybe one other quick thing. I'm afraid to digress on this too much, but since we brought it up, this machloket, where we have the machloket Hillel Shammai and the Chachamim, just to explain, there's this idea, right? When you have a mikveh, the mikveh, in order to be kosher, has to have 40 sa'ah of water that was rainwater that got there directly without it being lifted by a person in a kli and dumped in. So let's say if you have an open pit that's the size of 40 sa'ah and rainwater falls in it, that's fine. Or if rainwater falls and then it funnels into the mikveh, it streams into the mikveh. That's also okay. But what if you have less than 40 sa'ah, and then somebody comes along and throws in water that like from a bucket or from a cup? That will posel the mikveh. But how much water did they have to put in a mikveh that's not full in order to make the whole thing pasul? So Hillel says, Melohin mayim shuvin poslim into mikveh. A full hin of mayim, of drawn water, is enough to pasul the mikveh. And Shammai says, no, you need 9 kav of water, of drawn water to pasul the mikveh. And these two Gardiim said in the name of Shmayava Avtalya, no, you only need 3 lugim of mayim shuvin. That's the machloka. Okay. That was a good digression. But while we're here in Eduyot, the reason I really came to Eduyot was to show you this Mishnah here in the beginning of Perek Revi'i, where it says, Eilu dvarim mikulei Beit Shammai umechumrei Beit Hillel. And then it lists the things where Beit Hillel, remember, by the way, in the first chapter we were looking at, those are machlokot between Hillel and Shammai. This is Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. It's not the same thing. All right, but it lists things that are mikulei Beit Shammai, mechumrei Beit Hillel, and one of them is Beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov, and this is in fact the first Mishnah of Masechet Beitzah. Masechet Beitzah is also known as Masechet Yom Tov because it deals mainly with the halachot of Yom Tov, but popularly became known as Beitzah because that's the first word in the Mishnah. Beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov. And then there's a machloket between them. Beit Shammai says Soor b'kazayit chametz b'kikotemet. Beit Hillel says Zebizet kazayit, and then there's a couple more. But so that the point to get back to our sugya. So our sugya is here, and it says that yes, there's this machloket between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai about how much you drink on Yom Kippur in order to be chayav. Beit Shammai says a revi'it, Beit Hillel says melo lugmav, and now we understand it means kimlo lugmav, it's kadesh yir'eh. We accept all of that. And one of the reasons I accept that as it is because first I have this question: if it's true, right, that Beit Hillel says melo lugmav and it really means kimlo lugmav, then Beit Hillel's shiur is less than the shiur of Beit Shammai, which in the case of chiyuv on Yom Kippur will make him the machmir. And why is that a problem? Because I see there are places where Beit Hillel is machmir. There are other places where Beit Hillel is machmir. But the problem is that it's not listed where the Mishnah says specifically these are the machlokot between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, where Beit Hillel is machmir and Beit Shammai is mekil. That was the problem with that. And so we answer by saying that the reason it's not listed there is because this shita of Beit Hillel is not consistently machmir. It depends on the person. So it's not a chumrah per se. If it's talking about a really big person, then his shiur is mekil, and Beit Shammai is machmir. If it's a regular sized person, then in fact it's true that Beit Hillel is Machmir and Beit Shammai is Mikil. So we're coming to the end, and I see that it's difficult for Paul to stay with us, but what we're going to do, we're going to read a little bit ahead, and I'll just show you. The Gemara keeps pounding at this issue. The rest of this part of the sugya are different kashas on what we've concluded. So let's just remind ourselves, what did we conclude? That halacha is like Beit Hillel. The Mishnah says that you drink kimlo, if you drink, the way we understand the Mishnah is that if you drink kimlo lugmav on Yom Kippur, that you're chayav. Mishnah also says that if you eat kikotevet hagasa, you're chayav. So matkifla Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera attacks this. He says, "Ma'ishna achila, the kol chad v'chad b'kikotevet, u'ma'ishna shtiya, the kol chad v'chad b'didei." So here he asks the question, what's the difference between achila, meaning eating on Yom Kippur? How much do you have to eat on Yom Kippur to be chayav? Where each and every person is going to be chayav for eating a kokotevet. Whereas for drinking, it's going to be each and every person b'didei, according to himself personally. It's a relative shear. Why should there be a difference in the way I measure the shear? Amar le Abaye, so Abaye answered Rabbi Zera. He said, Kim lahu Rabbanan b'kikotevet, d'bahachin miyat v'date. It was established to the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan knew that eating a kikotevet of whatever it is, we will come to that in a second, that will be enough to put a person's mind at ease when they're fasting. But tzir mehachi, but less than a kikotevet, no miyat. Less than a kikotevet isn't enough to put somebody's mind at ease. Shtiya b'didei miyat v'date, b'dechavrei lo miyat v'date. And they also, in the same way that they knew that, they also knew that when it came to drinking, that it's going to be that person's cheekful that's going to put them at their mind at ease, but not the cheekful of their friend, of somebody else. So basically his answer is, this is what they knew, that the whole problem of eating and drinking on Yom Kippur, the Gemara is going to emphasize this a little bit later, is all based on the concept of hanefesh asher lo te'uneh, right? The soul that doesn't afflict itself or be afflicted on Yom Kippur is going to be chayav. And what is the affliction? Is this fasting. And Chazal understood that eating is one thing and drinking is another thing. And the way what will ease one's mind from the affliction of fasting for eating is a specific amount for all people. And for drinking, it's a relative amount for all people. So that leads us into the next kasha. Matkifla Rabbi Zera, the kol ha'olam kulo b'kikotevet. So you're saying the entire world, like everybody in the world, their mind will be put at ease by eating a kikotevet. V'og melcha b'sham b'kikotevet. Let's come back to og. You're saying everybody's going to have enough to eat to be miyashiv dat by eating kikotevet. But what about og? He was a big guy. How could it be that eating the same kikotevet hagasa that a little guy is enough to make him feel better? How can that work for og? Abaye says, he says that he basically gives him the same answer, but he qualifies it. So the Rabbanan knew that's the amount that puts a person's mind at ease. And less than that, it doesn't put their mind at ease. Mihu, nonetheless, kule alma tuva. For the whole world, it's for the vast majority of people, it it puts their mind at ease better, a lot. For somebody as big as Og Melech HaBashan, it'll put their mind at ease a little. In other words, now we come to a new concept that Yishuv Hadat in this regard is also really it's not a fixed thing, which makes sense, right? Because the idea that your mind is put at ease, in other words, that you've somehow relieved yourself from the affliction of fasting, it's not an absolute number. It's not an absolute thing. So he says, yeah, for a really big person, it will put their mind at ease somewhat. But that will be enough for them to be chayav. So maybe for a very small person, to take the other end, maybe it'll put their mind at ease a lot. But either way, their mind has been put at ease. And then Rabbi Zera says another one. Matkifla Rabbi Zera. Basar shamein b'kekotebet, v'lulovei gfanim b'kekotebet. So now he doubles down just on the size of the kekotebet. So kekotebet we know is a size. So he says, you're telling me that if a person eats a kekotebet hagasa of fatty meat, he's going to have the same yishuv hadat as a person who eats grapevine shoots. You know, what some people might call rabbit food. He's eating greens. It's like, so you have to take a lot of greens to get the kekotebet hagasa, but whatever it is, he's eating some kind of vegetable. You're saying that puts his mind at ease as much as a nice piece of fatty meat. So Bai says similar answer. Rabbanan knew that's how much it takes to put the person's mind at ease. Same answer he gave before. But he says mihu, nonetheless, basar shamein tuva. If he eats the fatty meat, that'll put his mind at ease a lot, at a higher level. If he's eating the grapevine leaves, the grapevine shoots, that'll be just a little bit. Then the last thing is this, and we're going to go over all this next time. Matkifla Rava. Rava asks the kasha. All these were Rabbi Zera and Abaye. Now Rava says, K'zayv b'chdei achilat pras, v'kotevet b'chdei achilat pras. That's the kasha. K'zayit, which is the shear for being of Isur, when you're not allowed to eat something, like k'zayit chametz, or k'zayit shuman. I'm sorry, k'zayit chelev. Right? Anything that's in Isur in Torah, we already established the shears k'zayis. And we have already discussed this earlier, that when you're eating something that's asur, you have to eat it within a specific period of time in order for it to be counted as that shiur. You don't have to gulp it all at once, but neither can you just take a little bit, throughout the whole day. And even if at the end of the day you've done the shiur, but there was such a long period of time between each of your nibbles that we don't say that it counts as a single shiur. So he said, so what's the shiur? The shiur in time is kedei achilat pras. So Rava now challenges not all the things that Rabbi Zera challenges from a different side. He says, you're telling me that kazayit, that I'm over on eating isurei ochlin, if I eat a kazayit b'chtei achilat pras. And at the same time, you're also telling me that in order to be over eating on Yom Kippur, I eat a kotevet, which is, we have already established, is a much larger shiur, and I still only have the kedei achilat pras. But Abaye also answers Rava, and he says, in a similar way. Kim lehu Rabbanan debahachim yat v'date. Again, this is how the Rabbanan knew that this would be enough to be miyashiv dat. Is if you wait until kotevet agasa b'chtei achilat pras, b'tfei mehachi, and if you ate kotevet agasa over a longer period of time, more than that, lo miyashiv dat. It won't be miyashiv dat. So we'll examine all of these ketayim next time. And I think that'll be it for tonight, unless anybody has something else they would like to add. Okay. Take care.
All right,
Have a
thank
good-
you. Good
Thank
night.
you. Bye-bye.